Alright. Alright. Nice. Wow, this Roy fellow with his fiery sword and confident attitude sure is cool. I sure hope he's well beloved and respected across the world. Oh no.
Hello everyone! It would appear that my favorite character is widely hated on the internet. So why don't you and me go on a mystical, magical adventure to see how Roy is actually pretty cool, and who knows, you might just learn something.
So, as you can clearly see, Roy is widely regarded as pretty bad in terms of character and gameplay, even being regarded as the worst lord in the series. However, as you can probably tell by the title of the video, I think the opposite. But to get the biggest issue out of the way first, let's cover his gameplay performance.
I refuse to lose!
Roy is a low movement lord that is sword-locked, which sounds pretty bad on paper, but I think in the context of Fire Emblem 6's early game, it works out quite well for him, and I think it's fair to say he's actually one of your most important units early on. For the first 3 chapters, you fight a lot of X units, which due to Fire Emblem 6's notoriously low accuracy can hardly hit sword units, which is one of the big reasons Rutger is one of the best units in the game, meaning in terms of enemies, Roy really has nothing to worry about here. Now wait, you might say, can't Marcus, Alan, or Lance just fight those enemies instead since they're better? Yes, you'd be right, Marcus, Lance, and Alan are several times better than Roy. I'm not going to deny that, but Roy not being good compared to your better options doesn't mean he's bad. Let's look at this example tier list I've made. While yes, extremely good units can easily handle these enemies, Roy can also deal with them just fine compared to one of your truly bad early game units like Wade, who has a hard time doubling enemy soldiers and can't hit consistently. Then, in chapters 4 and 7, often cited as some of the hardest chapters in the entire game, Roy is one of your most important units because of one tool, his rapier. Now again, you might be asking, why are you counting the rapier as a point for Roy when almost every other Fire Emblem lord has a rapier or an equivalent? Well, it's because Roy's actually matters. In Sacred Stones, even though Erica has one, you can just one-round everything with Seth anyway. In Shadow Dragon Hard 5, you can refine Marth's, but it's not needed, since you get a Rider's Bane in Chapter 4 that you can forge, or you could forge Sita's Wing Spear for infinitely better results. And even Hector Hard Mode can be turned into a Marcus simulator, making it just a novel tool for the lords of that game. However, I'd say it's almost required in Fire Emblem 6. Marcus can't double some of these enemy calves, and they're built extremely tough on hard mode, meaning even your strong units like Alan can hardly dent them, but Roy can. He can't double them unless he's speed blessed, but his damage is significant and quite accurate compared to some of your other options, and clearing out the calves quickly in both of these chapters is essential to prevent being swarmed by Rutger's gang and other reinforcements. Then we're on to the Western Isles, which is 5 straight chapters of mostly X units, which Roy can probably double at this point if you've given him some experience. However, these X units likely have an even more minuscule chance of hitting Roy at this point due to his great fire support affinity, which gives him hit and evasion, some of the 2 most important things in Binding Blade. And due to his great support growth and base with Alan and Lance, it's likely you have at least one support built up with them, making for a nice support triangle. However, that's assuming you've kept these 3 close together. This is where Roy's low movement comes into play. Sadly, compared to your better units, Roy's movement is quite low, meaning he can't quite keep up with the action as often. Luckily, FE6 has the rescue mechanic, meaning that Alan and Lance can keep Roy close to them at all times. To me, it's not that hard to rescue with Alan, go towards the enemy, and then drop with Lance. You'd probably want to keep him in the back lines after a while though, since he might have a teensy tiny itty bitty problem that starts to really show itself after his good performance in the Western Isles. Sadly, Roy's biggest issue that I have yet to bring up is Roy's promotion, that being that he doesn't get it until chapter 21 or 21X. At this point your main units are probably good to go for the rest of the game, and while through chapters 13 and 15X Roy can theoretically hold up well enough if you've given him a lot of EXP, after the route split it's done for him. Because the enemies of those 2 routes, Pegasus Knights and Nomads, are extremely fast and have the potential to one-round Roy, especially the Nomads with their high crit short bows. I'm not even going to try to defend his combat for this section of the game up until after 21X. But don't forget, if you leave him at 3 spaces or less away from Lance, Alan, or any other unit he's built support with, he can still supply extremely valuable bonuses. Then for the rest of the game, Roy gets access to the Binding Blade, an extremely powerful weapon that gives up to +5 defense and res. So even if you didn't give him much EXP, he'll still be able to manhandle some enemies, and especially dragons. Although it only has 20 uses, I find it's worth using a hammer and use on it, since it's such a good weapon. And it's likely his move is up to par with everyone else's at this point, assuming you visited the boot shop in Chapter 21, which most players do. So that's Roy's gameplay. Overall, his later mid-game and some late-game performance is pretty terrible, but I don't really think it's worth discounting his good performance in the early game, his great end-game performance for the final 3 chapters, and the support he can provide even in his more unfortunate segments. Overall, I would not call Roy a bad unit. Now onto his bland character.
Everyone's counting on me!
I can only assume that people call Roy bland because most of the time in the main story he's talking with Merlinus, who's, well, Merlinus. So his true character doesn't get a chance to shine until near the end. I think one of the most important things to remember about Roy is that he's only 15. Roy
was just 14 when his parents
told him to lead an army. Compared to the other lords who are mostly adults or near adulthood, he is a young child suddenly put in charge of an army because his father is sick, and this causes isolation, depression, and an immense amount of pressure is placed upon him. For his isolation, look at his wolf support. Once a person Roy considered to be his brother, since Roy's ascension to leadership, Wolt has treated him more like a master than a friend. This makes Roy angry as he doesn't want another servant. He's a child who's just been made the leader of the military, and what he needs is a friend. Although Roy is relieved to hear that Wolt will still always be there for him in the A support, it wouldn't exactly say the main issue is resolved, since Wolt didn't renounce his servile attitude, meaning that Roy still lost what could be considered a true friend. Then for his depression we have to go to his Shauna support, where he explains how he often puts on a happy face to keep his army pleased, but in reality he often gets depressed over the situation and seeks for guidance on how to feel happy. You can see the amount of pressure Roy has on his shoulders in his supports with Lance, where Roy states he needs to stay on the front lines, since that's the only way people will listen to him, since he's not that charismatic or smart. His self-deprecation also ties in with his depression. Even when he finally gets the legendary Binding Blade, he thinks he might not be worthy. However, Lance shows him that he's wrong, and that nobody would follow him if he wasn't charismatic, and that his army will always believe in him, which raises Roy's spirit. These issues make Roy an extremely relatable protagonist to me, as I went through similar situations when I was in high school, and am currently feeling isolated due to current events that you're probably extremely aware of, but I always had people, somewhat like Lance, there for me, be them friends or family. Despite the issues Roy faces, he still has 3 tools that help him triumph. The first being his friends, which I covered in the previous section. The second being his determination. As shown in his Alan support, despite the odds, he wants to keep everyone in his army alive, every single one, despite the position of power suddenly being thrust upon him, despite the sadness, despite the isolation, despite the odds of casualties, Roy wants to save everyone. Roy wants to save the world, but he can't do it alone. This brings us to Roy's third strength, his belief in humanity. As a brief aside, we need to establish how Fire Emblem antagonists usually have nothing to do with the main characters. At the end of Golden Deer, Claude fights an old man who he's never even seen before, and even though Marth has a similar belief in man to Roy, and spouts off how he wouldn't be there without his friends, this is pretty irrelevant to the Shadow Dragon that he has to beat up. Roy, however, is a direct foil to Zephiel, who throughout his childhood was abused and neglected by his father, and wants to end the Age of Man because of this. He even killed his own father. However, Roy had the opposite experience. Roy had a loving father, and although he was isolated from some of his friends, he made some new ones along the way too, and depending on your support choices, he may have even found love. And with his allies, he was able to be challenge after challenge, and this eventually brings him into direct conflict with Zephiel. Roy believes in the goodness of man, and so they fight, and Roy wins, saves the dragon girl, and thus concludes the story of Fire Emblem 6, and the story of Roy of Foray.
I will never back down!
So, those are my thoughts on Roy. Is he the best written lord? No. Is he the best lord gameplay-wise? Extremely, extremely far from it. But is he bland? Is he terrible? Is he the worst? No. For Beef, look at my thoughts. Here are 2 tier lists on my thoughts on the Lords gameplay-wise and character-wise. I won't go into it since it would likely make the video far longer. Regardless, Roy is an extremely important character to me, and after this video, I hope you understand him a little bit more too.
Alright everyone, and there it is, my latest scripted video. I definitely put a lot of passion into it. It's probably my favorite video that I made, so I hope you liked it too. If you want another one, you can click right there or right there. I don't know, I'm literally wearing a mask that I can't see out of, so forgive me. But yeah, I made a video on Mathis the Cavalier. I bet you didn't expect there would ever be a video I said about him. It's pretty similar to this video. And I would like to thank Vark for proofreading the script, and Invaderzz for thanking the thumbnail, or making it. This part isn't scripted, and because of the hassle of this part of my attire, I'm not re-recording this part, so yeah. If you like it, I hope you subscribe if you like what you see, and I have more videos coming all the time, so yeah. See you soon. Whoo!